Welcome everyone to our press conference, Women on the Front Lines of Climate Action. Climate action is the key words there. My name is Osprey Oyolake, and I am the founder and executive director of the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network, and I'm really honored to be here with my colleagues. I'm going to introduce them in the order that they're speaking, and then I'm going to give a few comments myself, and we will move forward in our press conference. We're first going to hear from Zukiswa White, who is the Gender Advisor and African Women's Development and Communications Network from FEMNET from South Africa. Then we'll be hearing from Susana Muhamad, who is a former Minister of Environment of Colombia and the new Special Envoy for the International Corporation for the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. And we're very honored at WECAN to sit on the steering committee of the treaty, and it's been quite a week. Some of you might have seen that Cambodia has now signed on to the treaty, and there's lots of really good updates from this week on the treaty, and so thank you for your work there. And then we'll be hearing from Taily Terena of the Terena Nation from the Pantanal biome in Brazil. Thank you, Taily, for being with us. She's also a youth leader, and very proud of your work, Taily. And then we'll be hearing from Camp-Horinek from the Ponca Nation. She's a Ponca Nation Environmental Ambassador, and we're very honored to have her on our WECAN board, and a project coordinator from Turtle Island, USA. As we see time and again, women in all of their diversity are on the front lines of climate disaster, but they are also on the front lines of climate solutions. And when women lead, it's very simple. The earth and our communities flourish. Data shows that just a 1-unit increase in the Women's Political Empowerment Index equates to an 11.5% decrease in a country's CO2 emissions. Governments with higher levels of female representation are more likely to ratify international environmental treaties, and women's leadership is essential to solutions that prioritize human and ecological well-being. Yet despite their critical role in climate action, at the opening of COP29, so that was last year, we don't have the stats yet from this year, only 8 of the 78 world leaders who spoke were women. We will see how these percentages play out here at COP30. But it's not only about the number of women in these spaces, but importantly, a feminist analysis that we're bringing. The new Gender Action Plan, or the GAP, is being negotiated at COP30. To meet the calls of our movements, it must be transformative, well-resourced, rights-based, inclusive, measurable, and not yet another checkbox exercise. One way we can push the GAP to be transformative and climate action overall is through demanding climate finance be based on climate justice principles. Here in Belém, WECAN is releasing a policy brief, Justice-Based Climate Finance for COP30 and Beyond. Last year at COP29, the world's richest countries failed once again to meet their obligations. They pledged only $300 billion in annual climate finance when experts, economists, and communities on the front lines have made it clear we need at least $5 trillion a year to confront this crisis. So let's get real about this financing, and it's something that women leaders are doing. $5 trillion isn't a dream. It's a debt owed to those whose lands and labor have fueled centuries of extraction. And this finance must come as grants and not loans. We cannot build climate justice on the backs of nations already burdened by debt. And we know the money exists. In 2025, overall, NATO spending is projected to surpass $1.5 trillion. Meanwhile, fossil fuel subsidies continue to drain $331 billion a year in destruction. Imagine if that money went towards protecting forests, funding women land defenders, and rematriating indigenous lands instead of fueling war and pollution. Earlier this year, the International Court of Justice and the International American Court of Human Rights issued advisory opinions stating that wealthier nations have legal responsibilities under international law to support climate action, including through climate finance. Climate finance is not aid, it's reparations, it's justice. But justice isn't only about numbers, it's about who decides, who leads, and who benefits. And that means especially ensuring Indigenous, Afro-descendant, rural, and frontline women are at the decision-making table. Women are keeping communities alive in the face of drought, flooding, and displacement, and are a major force in global food systems. They hold generations of knowledge about medicine, farming, and forest care, yet only 4% of official development assistance has gender equality as a main goal. Women are doing the work of climate resilience with almost no financial support. It's time to fund women's climate leadership, not as a side issue, but as a foundation of global climate action. Gender-responsive finance has already been shown to produce more effective outcomes for adaptation. When women lead, communities thrive, ecosystems heal, and democracies strengthen, which is crucial as we see the rise of authoritarian governments. The work ahead is also about reimagining what we value. The care economy, care for children, elders, communities, and the land is a pillar of resilience, yet it remains invisible in climate budgets. Around the world, women in all their diversity perform 3 times more unpaid care work than men. Investing in care is climate action. In the United States, every $1.3 trillion invested in care infrastructure could generate $3 trillion in return by 2030. That's more than just good economics, it's good humanity. When we value care as a public good, we build societies that are resilient, equitable, and low carbon. And we cannot talk about justice without talking about Indigenous leadership. Indigenous peoples protect most of the world's biodiversity, yet receive less than 1% of climate finance directly. That has to change, and it's not on the table here at COP30, and it needs to be. Protecting Indigenous sovereignty is one of the most effective climate solutions on Earth, and yet extractive industries continue to violate their rights in the name of green growth. At COP30, governments need to ensure direct access to funds for Indigenous-led projects, uphold free, prior, informed consent, and end the hypocrisy of financing destruction while claiming to fund solutions. Climate finance at COP30 must fund women's leadership, Indigenous sovereignty, the care economy, and community-led solutions, not corporate loopholes and false promises. It must reject the militarization of climate policy and redirect every dollar that fuels destruction into the hands of those cultivating life, women. When women lead, when Indigenous rights are upheld, when care is funded, and when finance flows where it's needed most, we don't just survive the climate crisis, we transform it into an opportunity for justice, healing, and building a world that thrives in balance with each other and the Earth. We demand nothing less than this. Let's have the women lead. Thank you. And with that, I'm very honored to hand the floor over to Zukiswa. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Osprey. I am Zukiswa White, a Pan-Africanist and feminist organized in movements and with the African Women's Development and Communications Network. 10 years after Paris, African women are still waiting justice. But we are done waiting, and we're done being patient, and we're certainly done being polite about a system designed to fail us. Let me be clear about what we're seeing here at COP30. The conference is negotiating the terms of a new kind of extractivism, one that is dressed in green, marketed as clean, but built on the same colonial violence as the fossil fuel era it claims to replace. Right now, negotiators are fine-tuning language on carbon markets and so-called nature-based solutions captured by polluters and the fossil fuel industry. Meanwhile, Sudan is experiencing famine, the worst humanitarian crisis. 21 million people facing acute food insecurity, over 500,000 children dead for malnutrition. Climate-induced drought has intensified resource conflicts that have displaced 14 million people, most of them women and children. But there's no draft text on famine, no contact group on humanitarian catastrophe, because Sudan's crisis can't be financialized. It's been erased from the agenda. Right now, as we speak, children as young as 5 are working in cobalt mines in the Democratic Republic of Congo so that the global north can drive electric vehicles and call it climate action. The DRC produces 70% of the world's cobalt. The mining sector, however, contributes less than 1% to its GDP. Sudan faces famine. Congo's children mine your green future. Tell me how that is a just transition. Africa holds 85% of the world's manganese, 80% of its platinum, 70% of its cobalt. Yet we remain energy poor, resource cursed, and excluded from decision-making about our own minerals, on our own lands, and our own futures. From the cobalt mines of Congo to the drought-stricken fields of Sudan, African women bear the weight of the crisis we did not create. The energy transition risks repeating extractive injustice under a green banner. Indigenous communities in Argentina watch their water supplies disappear to lithium mining. Women in Indonesia see fragile forests destroyed for nickel. Across the world, climate change intensifies resource scarcity that is fueling conflict. African women carry the triple burden: climate impacts we didn't cause, extractive violence in our communities, and unpaid care work holding everything together while our governments negotiate away our sovereignty. And so here is what African feminists demand. 1, the Belém action mechanism must be established with binding commitments, not voluntary frameworks, with grant-based finance that reaches grassroots organizations directly, not loans that deepen debt. Finance must reach women, especially in conflict-affected areas like Sudan, not just stable democracies. 2, critical minerals governance must respect free, prior, and informed consent. And that means our right to say no, not consultation, not participation, our right to say no, our right to inform what constitutes critical minerals, and to ask the question in earnest, critical minerals for who? 3, establish legally protected no-go zone. The Congo Basin rainforest, the Okavango Delta, Lake Victoria wetlands, our sacred forests, and our ancestral lands. These are, for us, climate infrastructure, not sacrifice zones for your green transition. Mining must be off limits in ecosystems that store carbon, sustain livelihoods, and have protected our communities for generations. The land is ours. 4th, the Gender Action Plan must have teeth, which means measurable finance target, binding commitments on care, protection for defenders, and direct access for women's organization. No more mainstreaming rhetoric while women are displaced, criminalized, and erased. 5th and last, the architecture of finance is not failing to deliver justice, it is currently designed to prevent it. 80% of the MEGA finance Africa receives comes as loans. This is structural violence that forces cuts to health, education, and social services. How do you repay loans when millions starve, are energy poor, and pathways to sustainable development continue to evade us? Of the climate finance available, less than 2% reaches grassroots organizations. As I could close, women, indigenous people, youth, defenders and protectors of land and life, rights holders around the world have been building solutions while negotiators have been building excuses. We practice agroecology while they promote industrial agriculture. We protect forests while fossil fuel lobbyists outnumber our delegations. We center care while they center profits. We hold communities together through famine, conflict, displacements while they debate procedural text. We are advocating for access without intermediary, power in presence. We are advocating for a transition that moves from extraction to generation, from debt and austerity to redistribution and care. Financing as a public good, not finance that replicates pervasive and extractive colonial patterns. COP30 must deliver on climate action or get out of the way of those of us who are, who have, who will continue. The peoples will always. History and humanity is on our side. We will win. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zukiswa White. And now I hand the floor to Susana Muhamad.
Thank you very much. It's very important to hear women voices, and actually to hear the voices from the front lines of the climate crisis, the voices of those who actually dare to remind us that we are in the sacred territory of the Amazon, and that had to interrupt this conference, filling these rooms with the blood, the sweat, and the tears of what the climate crisis is causing, and the lack of capacity of governments and the lack of capacity of societies to put up front these people at the front line. The most dramatic picture of this COP30 was this fence, where on the one side was the COP30 castle full of military personnel, and on the other side, the indigenous peoples, the women with their children in their hands, reminding that they still don't have access to land. And it's happening here in Brazil because fortunately we are in a democratic government that allows for social protest, that allows for participation, and that allowed for a conflict to emerge that for me shows the picture of the 21st century. The peoples on the one side of the fence, the military fossil capital driven economy on the other side of the fence, defending their interests that has caused, in this history of the last 200 years, inequality, expropriation, and actually the homogenization of peoples under one system, the system of exploitation of nature, the exploitation of women, and the exploitation of people. So if we want to solve this climate crisis, we need to turn it around. We need to go deeper into the democratic process. We need to go deeper into the political power of the voices in the front lines. And we need to go deeper that the decision-making process is full of the tears, the blood, and the sweat of those that are struggling for survival. And we are able to do this. I think the two COPs in Latin America, the COP16 in Cali and the COP30 in Belém, is showing the effects that this can have in global decision-making. And at the forefront of that are women. Women that are leaders in the community, women that are leaders in their family, women that are taking care of their children, and women that at the same time are fighting for climate justice. So my call here is not to the governments. My call here is to women around the world, and my call here is around to the people of the world, that we need to unite, that we need to organize, and that we need to resist, because actually the struggle is escalating to another level. It is not now anymore about the legalized process of expropriation. It is now going to the capital fossil fuel interests, taking the public good in governments as in the United States, and actually militarily taking over the resources and taking over the lives of people. And for that to stop, we should unite. Also with the democratic governments, we should unite with the peoples on the ground, and we should put women up front. Finally, this COP, within its limitations, which are huge, because the process is very imperfect, but with these limitations, could bring a roadmap for the phase out of fossil fuels, a roadmap from Baku to Belém for addressing the structural issues of finance. It could also bring the finance on adaptation, and it could bring the sense that the participation and the opening of these walls, the castle that needs to open, that is now defended through the military, should open itself to the voices of the peoples in the front lines. And I want to thank the resistance in Palestine, the women in the front lines, and the women that have mobilized here with their children from the Amazon to show the world the century we are living and the possibility of this struggle.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and also to continue to say that we need to have women from the front lines, Indigenous women, frontline women. They need to be the biggest voices we listen to. Thank you. And with that, we hear from one, Taily Terena. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Osprey, and thank you all of you. Indigenous greetings from the Terena Nation. I want to tell you, I'm from here, Brazil, but my people comes in a territory that is more in the center-south of the country. Our region is always in the top 5 of the Global Witness Report as one of the most dangerous places to be an indigenous right defender or an environmentalist. Every week, basically, we had some attacks in our region, and I want to echo what happened this weekend. While we are having COP right now, one Kiowa, indigenous from the Guarani people, was murdered with a shot in his head. Another 4 was mainly injured. One of them, it's a woman, a teacher that was only defending the right to land. Unfortunately, their lives are not being visibilized in the spaces, not even through media, local media, or international media. So I want to use this opportunity to mention that. Even though we are entering the 2nd week, a lot of the negotiations are moving forward, our rights and demands are not being considered in the text. I could say some actions that Terena women are leading here in our territory, especially the youth, but I think I want to highlight one biggest one, that is the role of indigenous women in our culture. We are taught that we need to take care of our people, our communities, and our territories. For many years, colonizers said to us that this was our weakness as women because we feel with our hearts, we take actions with our hearts. And we could see this last week with the Munduruku women taking the space and occupying the entrance to be heard. The COP presidency is saying that this is the biggest and the bestest indigenous participation in history. But unfortunately, most of the indigenous peoples that are here in Belém are not allowed to enter in the space and to have a voice to speak in the decision-making process. Yet the lobbyists from the fossil fuels industry have the right to sit in the table, have the right to negotiate, and this is not acceptable. COP is here at our home, and yet our leaders are left out. I'm privileged to be here sitting and speaking to you the reality that we are facing here in Brazil, but I cannot be the only one. Some of our references at Alessandra Munduruku could only enter here after blocking the entrance. And after she did that, taking this bold action to stand up and close the entrance, she's now suffering a lot of life threats, and she cannot return to her territory now because of that. And no one knows, because people think it's all solved because she had the conversation with the COP presidency. There is an image that is really famous right now after this conversation. That is the COP presidency holding the baby from the Munduruku people. And I could not let to tell that I really bother with that image, because it shows how colonization works in our lives. They come, they take the picture, and they leave. They don't guarantee our rights to be really listened in the spaces. Of course, with their demand, they managed to have their territories now recognized, but only through pressure. And even though in these corridors we were listening how our actions were being criminalized, youth are here to echo our voices, and we cannot let one letter by the Secretariat Simon to be the decisions that these spaces has. UN is supposed to be a diplomatic spaces. UN is supposed to be a safe space for us to echo our voices. We as indigenous peoples want to have the right to sit in the table as our own governance, traditional leaders, because we have the solution for climate action. We don't want to do this by ourselves. We want to do this collective, and I think the power of women is on that. Women in our diversity, as I see in this table, is the power that I really believe that can change the world. And to decolonize the systems is the most important thing that we have to do and change the planet as the way we need it. So I want to say thank you, and let's take the action and do the mutirão in the right way. Aina poiakwe.
Thank you so much, Taily. Really appreciate your comments, and we have our condolences for those that have been murdered this week. The whole time we have been here, that is so wrong, and we've been talking all week about how insane it is that we are fighting for our lives and fighting our governments to live, to live. So thank you for your words here. And with that, I'm very honored to give the floor to Casey Camp-Horinek from the Ponca Nation.
Ponca, Oklahoma. Judy is my true name. I'm a member of the Ponca Nation from the occupied territory in Turtle Island called Oklahoma. Here with my daughter, coming to say thank you to those of you from Brazil who are allowing us to come into your territory, not the territory of the United Nations Conference on Climate Change, but your territory. I want to say thank you for allowing us to be here, and that we stand in total solidarity, because we had this idealistic thinking that we were coming to the Indigenous Peoples COPs, because we thought that with so many of the family that we call Indigenous peoples of this territory, that we would be coming into your territory, uplifting your voices, watching you making the decisions and understanding. But we should have known better, because we lived in a colonized state up on Turtle Island right now, where there is ICE agents, militarized police in virtually every state right now, arresting people of color, torturing children, separating them from their families. This is our norm. This is how we've always been treated. And yet we still come to these halls because we strategize with each other around things like rights of nature, that is indigenous-led, I should say, as well as indigenous-led just transitions. And if all of these people who are here were thinking about the generations to come, instead of themselves and lining their own pockets by looking at the false solutions around carbon trading, around carbon sequestration, all of the things that you mentioned. And instead of looking at that, we're looking at a true path forward of phasing out fossil fuels, making a just transition without going into our territories again and raping and killing and having man camps, and doing all of the things that they have done for 500 years or more under the eyes of their own greed, is all I could say, because everything here has been finance-based. Every decision has been based on how they can make money from this situation. Civil society has no choice but to rise up and change things. Change things in your home, change things in your neighborhood, change things at COPs. And if we have a chance to take to the streets with our relatives from this part of the world, we have to do it. We have to be the ones to say, step down that military right now, make decisions based on honor, on dignity, on generations to come having food to eat, water to drink, air to breathe. This is not a complicated thing. It is recognizing that we humans are a part of nature, not separate from. We eat, drink, and breathe nature. Therefore, we are. We who live on the front lines have done this for centuries. It's time for everyone, everywhere to step up. Yes. Demand climate justice, demand it now.
What do we want? Climate justice. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Climate justice. When do we want it? Now.
Oh, let me set this somewhere.